check my watch to see if it was still morning here. But I just wanted to say that in terms of my relationship with Bob Shutter, I would consider us to have been contemporaries. We are of the 1970s vintage that Dr. Broom mentioned, and I was on Dr. Broom's committee, so Bob and I were more like peers or mentors during those years. And so what I'd like to do would be just to share a few memories, but I also like to think of myself as an archivist of sorts. So I went back to look at convention programs for those years and vaguely remembered when Bob was part of a program in intercultural communication of which I was either a part or was connected with. And so in that regard, I went back to the Central States Archives and looked at the times that Bob and I were either on the same program or we had similar interests. So my memory of Bob Shutter goes back to the late 1970s when we were both young scholars in the field of intercultural communication. Those of us in intercultural communication during those years developed an affinity that was consummated each time that we met at a convention. I felt renewed and inspired after each meeting. Bob's gentle, genuine handshake is what I remember. It was unmistakable. He was quite knowledgeable and a true advocate for the field of intercultural communication. As Dr. Broom had said, Bob was a mentor, I would say a cross-fertilizer, a proverbial thorn in the side in a very positive way, in the way that he pushed us to be our very best. And so he challenged us in positive ways. He brought out the best in all of us. As I look back over the archival data for those years, 1991, 1998, and 2002, I would like to end my remarks by sharing with you some of that archival data. In 1991, at the Central States Communication Association Convention, there was a program called Perspectives on Intercultural Communication Research in the 90s. And Bob was one of the participants there, so let me just share with you some of the other titles of the presentations, and then I'll work down to Bob. The moderator was my advisor, the late Dr. Noblesse Ascension Lande from KU. And I'll just go straight to the program itself. Dr. Lande presented a paper on intercultural communication research in South Africa, agenda for the 90s. Njoku Awa, who was at Cornell University, and Andrew Momike presented a paper on intercultural development research in Nigeria. Our own Dr. Robert Shutter's paper title was Intercultural Communication Research in the United States, and the term co-cultures that Dr. Broom just mentioned. Co-cultures in the 90s was there. And then finally, there was Erika Vora from St. Cloud State University in Minnesota, whose paper was titled Intercultural Communication Research in Germany, Co-Cultures in the 90s. So again, she recapitulated the term co-cultures that we're crediting Dr. Shutter with having introduced. Now I'm going to go quickly to Central States for 1998. There was a program titled Research on Intercultural Communication Practices. Linda D. Dixon from Bowling Green State University was the chair. One program was titled Meta-Analysis Evaluation of Intercultural Communication Competence Research. by Lisa Bradford, Mike Allen, and Kevin Bissett of the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. Another paper was Values as a Measure of Intercultural Sensitivity by Janet Blue, Surja Kapoor, and Mark Kamadina from Illinois State University. And there was a paper, A Guide for United States Instructors Teaching in Japan by Michelle Wilkes Carrilla from Southern Illinois University. And Dr. Shutter here was one of the discussants. So I'm sure that he really, enlightened the discussion of those papers whose titles I just listed. And also there was a Lin Chin from Hong Kong Baptist University who was co-discussant on that panel. I'm going to go to one more, and that was for the year 2002. And I had the pleasure of being on the same panel with Bob, so let me share that with you. This was for the Central States Communication Association. The title of the paper was, program was Roundtable Discussion, Intercultural Communication Division, the Development of Intercultural Communication from Our Own Perspectives, Central States Communication Association, and Beyond. Our co-chair was a former colleague, Bob Lamont Fields, who was at the University of Wisconsin at Whitewater. Now, let me tell you who the participants were. Nobleza Asuncion Lande, University of Kansas, Melissa L. Beal, University of Northern Iowa, Myrna Cornette DeVito of Emporia State University, Linda D. Dixon, Bowling Green State University, Barbara Monfields, who I said was also the chair, and yours truly from the University of Kansas. This roundtable discussion will provide an analysis of the development and evaluation of intercultural communication as a discipline, particularly its evolution in the Midwest and in the Central States Communication Association. Discussants will begin by distributing a one-page summary answering the questions: how has the field evolved and what trends are emerging for future directions? In the discussion, each participant will relate a story that illustrates her perspective of one stage of the evolution. Following the stories, discussants will interact with the audience members and each other in discussing the present status and focus and the future trends in intercultural communication theory and research. So I end by saying that there wasn't a better person to encapsulate the knowledge of both theory and research in intercultural communication. So to Diane and others, I extend my sympathy. Bob was a very, very dear colleague for all of us in intercultural communication.